Okay, hello everybody and welcome to the 18th presentation in the Virtual History Series presented by Baltimore Heritage and the Baltimore Architecture Foundation. This is Nathan Denny's, Associate Director of the Baltimore Architecture Foundation. Thank you to everyone who donated to be with us this week. Your support is crucial for producing the virtual histories for free each week, and we so appreciate your generosity and support. And a few announcements before we launch into today's presentation. We are taking a break next week for the Be More Historic Unconference, which is going to be hosted next Friday virtually. It is personally one of my favorite events, the one time of the year when many Baltimore historians, preservationists, archivists, and museum professionals gather together to workshop ideas and collectively better our field. And it's also a lot of fun. We'll be back on September 25th with Jean Baker, who will be discussing her new book on Benjamin Henry Latrobe. For our talk focus, he will be focused on buildings that were designed in Baltimore, including the Basilica pictured here. Then some very exciting news. We'll be kicking off this year's month-long virtual Doors Open Baltimore with Aaron Henkin discussing the award-winning Out of the Blocks on WYPR. Expect more Doors Open announcements in the coming weeks. And next week, we'll begin promoting our lineup of Doors Open programs, and I cannot wait to share them with you. And please mark October 2nd on your calendars for the kickoff lecture. Registration is available on our website. And now today's presentation. Nancy Proctor is founding director of the Peale, a center for Baltimore stories and studies, and a laboratory for cultural innovation based in the historic Peale Museum building. Previously, Nancy was Deputy Director of Digital Experience and Communications at the Baltimore Museum of Art, Head of Mobile Strategy Initiatives at the Smithsonian Institution, and Head of New Media Initiatives at the Smithsonian's American Art Museum. With a PhD in American art history and a background in filmmaking, curation, and feminist theory and criticism in the arts, Nancy lectures and publishes widely on technology and innovation in museums, in French and Italian, as well as in English. Please add questions you have for Nancy in the Zoom chat box, and we will get to as many as we can at the end. With that, take it away, Nancy. And I also have a poll for everybody. Um, oh,
Yeah.
don't have a poll. The poll has disappeared. We've never done a poll before, but the question was, and you can use the chat box to say yes or no here, is how familiar are you with the Peale? Are you familiar with the Peale's history, or do you know nothing about it? If you're familiar with the Peale, then say yes. If you know
There
nothing
it
about
is.
the Peale, then say no.
There's your poll. This is great, just to understand the audience here. Thank you so much, Nathan. And just to be clear, I was planning to present this talk in English. But if anybody wants to ask a question in Italian or French, I can do my best to respond. I'm delighted to be here. Also very much looking forward to both Jean Baker's talk on the 25th. We are extremely honored to have Jean on the board of the Peale. And she's a great speaker as well as a great scholar, and also thrilled to see our good friend Aaron Henkin kicking off Doors Open. So I will be there, and I hope you all can join us as well. I will also mention, and I'll come back to this in my talk, that the evening of September 25th, the Peale is hosting a gala, and so it will feature the opening of the online exhibition of Out of the Blocks, the stories and the photographs by Aaron Henkin and Wendell Patrick. So if you aren't zoomed out after hearing Dr. Baker's talk on the 25th, you're very welcome to join us that evening from 7 to 8:30 p.m. And so we have, oh, and I also wanted to mention that as part of that gala, we'll be delighted to be kind of introducing our new colleague, Krista Green, who is also, I believe, chair of the board of Baltimore Heritage. And Krista has just joined the Peale team as our chief administrative officer. So she and I are effectively job sharing as the first step in a real kind of exploration of different structures, different models for leadership and governance of the Peale that can be more inclusive, more diverse, and we hope more sustainable. One of the things that the Peale does is we're a laboratory for cultural practice, so we're always interested in trying new things that might serve our communities and our audiences, and helps not just sustain the Peale, but also provide models that other cultural organizations can learn from in future. So do come as well and meet Krista, and I'm sure you will see her around in Baltimore and say hi, and know that we're all family now, right? We're all one degree of separation, if that, as Johns Hopkins likes to say. All right, so this is great. Thanks to everybody for answering the poll. So we've got 28% yes or familiar with the Peale and its history, 41% no, 31% a little bit. So I'm going to have to kind of try to bridge the audiences and the background, and I hope I won't be too redundant or boring for anyone. This isn't a terribly large group, so I will try my best to keep an eye on the chat. And, you know, personally, I'm very up for taking questions and trying to answer things as they come along. So we can be a little bit less formal than we might otherwise be. All right, so Nathan, are you ready for me to take over on the screen sharing?
Go ahead, it's all you.
All right, so here we go. So this is really about reimagining the Peale for the 21st century, and thinking of, as I mentioned, in the spirit of being a laboratory, the Peale as not just a treasure house of culture, but also a production house, a place where the stories of Baltimore are shared and new stories are created, and new art, new performance, new history really is made available and has a platform. You'll also see my contact details at the bottom of the screen. You can email me at cso@thepealecenter.org, or contact me on Twitter as @NancyProctor. So the Peale's mission, to kind of say it in a short and pithy phrase, is to help people see Baltimore in a new light. We feel like, you know, Baltimore is one of the oldest cities in the country. It has an incredibly rich history. It has always been diverse and international in its communities. And yet it seems too often what we're known for is a very limited range of narratives that really just don't adequately represent the city and its incredible creativity and diversity and its rich history. So the Peale is being really rethought and relaunched as a platform for authentic Baltimore stories, with a very specific aim of making sure that new voices and stories that may not have been heard enough in the past are amplified and become part of the cultural record going forward. So that's really our aim, is to, through the diversity of stories, help people see Baltimore in a new light, and in essence, change the narratives that the city is known for. This is our historic building on Holiday Street in downtown Baltimore. We're sort of catty-cornered from City Hall, 2 doors down from Ida B's table and the Real News Network. On the right side of this image on our block is the historic Zion Church. So we are really fortunate, we think, to be in this area. We're within walking distance of the Inner Harbor. We've got great neighbors and just a wonderful community spirit every Sunday. There's the farmers market down at the end of Holiday Street. If you go by, you will see that we are currently closed for our interior renovations. And we are operating out of the nearby Carroll Mansion when we can operate in person. But for the moment, actually, we are fully operational online and have been since the end of March. So do check out our website and you'll see a range of programs and things that you can join us for there. This is Holiday Street, and as seen in the website earlybaltimore.org, a wonderful project created by UMBC with in partnership with Maryland Maryland Historic Society. I've just realized that my chair is squeaking terribly and distracting me, so let me see if I can fix that. So I hope you're not hearing it as well. So this is a view of Baltimore in around 1815. And it is a 3D reconstruction that you don't need any special software for. You can just go to this website address and zoom in and zoom around and see what was in Baltimore at this period towards after the end of the War of 1812, effectively. And so you see Baltimore on Holiday Street, see the Peale Center on Holiday Street there. Behind is the old Zion Church, the original Zion Church, which was well, actually, the very original wasn't on this site from about 1755, but this is the 1807 building, the first building on that plot of land. And the building that is currently next door to us is from about 1907, I believe, about 100 years later. There was a fire in the older church and it had to be reconstructed. In fact, the early history of the Peale is one of escaping fires miraculously. That would be one way to tell the story. The Great Fire of Baltimore of 1904 burned through half of the building that you don't see in this image, but is on our left. In fact, if you go into that building today, you can still see a kind of an unevenness in the floor where they rebuilt, and one half of the building settled more than the other. And of course, the Zion Church suffered fire. The other miraculous escape was that one of the things that Rembrandt Peale did was he introduced gaslight to his museum and eventually to the whole city of Baltimore. And the little shed that you see in the back is a reconstruction of what we think that shed, the place where the gas was manufactured by essentially burning pitch, would have been. So, you know, experimental gaslight technology, a gas manufacturing plant in the backyard of the museum. These are not things that are typically recommended for the safety of a museum building and its collection, but touch wood, we've survived this far. Part of why we are currently under renovation is to install a sprinkler system throughout the building so that indeed the Peale does not go the way of Notre Dame Cathedral or the National Museum of Brazil. That we will be better protected in future. So as you may be aware, the Peale was actually founded. That building was opened on August 15th, 1814 by this gentleman here, Rembrandt Peale. He was the second son of Charles Wilson Peale from the Peale family of artists. And his father had actually started the first museum in the country, sort of an outgrowth of his studio and home in Philadelphia, in 1786. 1786. And here is the patriarch of the family, Charles Wilson Peale himself, in a self-portrait that he painted towards the end of his life called Portrait of the Artist in His Museum. And here he's raising the red carpet to welcome us to the long gallery in his museum. And we see a sort of a representation of not just the people he expected to visit his museum, but the reactions that he expected them to show. So we see a Quaker lady raising her hands, showing wonder. We see an older gentleman, perhaps a father or a tutor, explaining things to a younger man, and another man in the distance, lost deep in thought. They're looking at a collection of natural history specimens. The Peales taxidermied a whole collection of birds and displayed them quite often actually in kind of dioramas, so you could see the birds in their natural habitat. And then around the top of the room there, we see portraits of famous Americans. This was the family's bread and butter. They painted George Washington so many times that he quipped he had been peeled all around. He'd had so many different members of the Peale family paint him. And so portraits of famous Americans was really how a major way that the family would make money. And Charles Wilson Peale did teach all of his children, his biological children, to paint, including the women. And named them all after famous artists, except for a couple who were named after famous natural scientists. So the eldest son was Raphael Peale, there was Rembrandt, there was Titian, Rubens, And as we'll see here, Angelica Kaufman Peale was the oldest daughter. There was another young person in the household named Moses Williams, and he in fact cut this silhouette of Angelica Kaufman Peale. He was not a biological child of the Peales, and he was not taught to paint as were the other children, but he was born to an enslaved couple who were traded to Charles Willson Peale in payment for a couple of portraits he had painted. And this is in fact a silhouette that has been attributed to Raphael Peale, the eldest son in the family. This is of Moses Williams. So Moses by Raphael and Angelica Kaufman Peale by Moses Williams. So Moses Williams' parents were emancipated, and this is a part of the Peale family history that we're actually gearing up to dig into more deeply, because the amount of information that we have now is really intriguing. At the time that Moses's parents came into the family household, slavery was actually already illegal in Philadelphia, and in part due to the efforts of Charles Willson Peale. He was part of the commission that abolished slavery in Philadelphia, the first city in America to do so. And yet they remained with the family. Moses was born to the couple while they were as part of the Peale household, and in fact stayed with the family until he was 27. Now, this was another part of this law, anti-slavery law, that if you had had an enslaved person in your household, you were responsible for them financially until the age of 27. So that may be why Moses stayed with the family, but he was definitely in a sort of an indentured, if not enslaved status. He was nonetheless taught how to cut silhouettes and how to operate what was called a physiognotrace, a silhouette cutting machine. And when you visited Peale's Museum in Philadelphia, at the end of your visit, you could either pay a penny and have your silhouette sort of automatically cut by this machine, which Moses would operate, or you could pay an extra 5 cents and he would finish that for you, and you would get a beautiful piece of work. Like this one of Angelica Kaufman Peale with all the fine hair and lace and everything else. Moses did actually quite well in this business and ended up earning enough money to be able to buy himself a house. He married the Peale family's indentured Irish servant cook, had 2 children, and did quite well until the invention of the photograph, because really the silhouette was the cheap snapshot, if you will, of this day. If you couldn't afford to hire one of the Peale family to paint your portrait, you could get a silhouette cut. And photography, unfortunately, put Moses Williams and a lot of other photographers out of business. But this is a part of the Peale family history that we're very keen on learning more about. And if anybody in the audience here knows anything about this or would like to get involved in that research, pretty much everything we do at the Peale is very community driven and community based, and we'd love to hear from you. So one thing that you might have noticed, I'll just go back quickly to this self-portrait by Charles Willson Peale. Behind the red curtain to the right, you see the palette, the tools of his trade, but also you see a skeleton. Well, that was a skeleton of a mastodon, the earliest prehistoric animal to have ever been exhibited in a museum anywhere in the world. And it was excavated by Charles Willson Peale and his sons in 1801 in upstate New York. A farmer had found these large bones in his field. Charles Willson Peale got wind of it, got permission to go up there and excavate, and later painted this painting, which is in the collection of the Maryland Historical Society. It's an idealized painting in that in the portrait, the group on the right standing on the cliff includes Charles Willson Peale. He's the man gesturing towards the pit there, but also his son Raphael, Rembrandt, and Rubens, and not one but 2 of his wives, one of whom was already deceased, so we know this was an idealized portrait, and a few of the family children and grandchildren. showing off a drawing of one of the large bones and kind of the nature of the dig. Really fascinating painting. Despite its idealized nature, it tells us an awful lot about the technology that had to be created to the pump to get the water out of the pit, and exactly who and how this was excavated. So again, hearkening back to the endemic racism that, of course, was not just now, but also then in America, only whites were hired to do this excavation because there was this sense that it was such delicate work, it needed highly specialized labor. And on that note, I realized I neglected to mention one interesting thing if we go back again to this portrait, self-portrait of Charles Willson Peale in his museum. We do see, of course, the people that he has visiting here are all white. And that was apparently the expectation of who the visitorship would be. Nonetheless, there was, again, a sort of as with his abolitionist activities, so to speak, a sort of a gesture towards a perhaps more progressive or liberal view of museums on Charles Wilson's part and how he ran them. So he really positioned museums and argued for them as institutions of education that were really critical for the health, the well-being, and indeed the democracy of the young United States. And he petitioned his friends, who included Thomas Jefferson and George Washington, to give money to museums, to support them through public funds. He never got a penny out of them. But his argument really was that museums were democratizing institutions that should be part of public education. Of course, who would have access to that education was another matter. And that's, in fact, a theme that runs through the history of the Peale that I'll pick up on again in just a moment. This is there were enough bones excavated from this dig in upstate New York to reconstruct 2 complete mastodon skeletons. This is one of them on display at the Maryland Historical Society. I understand he's called Shorty. The other one, which made its way to Germany, is actually currently installed at the Smithsonian American Art Museum as a part of the Humboldt exhibition there, which unfortunately hasn't been able to open to the public just yet. I think that might be coming imminently, but there have been virtual tours online, wonderful talks by the curator, and I do highly recommend it if you're able to attend that. But one of the neat things that has been uncovered about, or has been written about with these mastodons, was they're so large that you can seat a table, at least a 4-top, underneath it. And so one of the things that was held were mastodon dinners, where you got to dine underneath a mastodon. So the mastodon was a huge draw, getting people to come not just to the Philadelphia Museum, but to the Baltimore Museum, where the second of the skeletons was on exhibit, and you paid extra to see it. The other big draw that Rembrandt Peale had when he opened the doors to his museum and needed to sell tickets to pay back the investors who had helped pay for the building of that building was gaslight. So you may all be aware that Baltimore is called Light City. Well, it really comes back to scenes like this one, as depicted in a 1933 engraving by the artist McGill McCall. And this is Rembrandt Peale demonstrating gaslight. So up until this period, it's fascinating to think that over the thousands of years of human history, the sources of light were actually fairly limited. They were torches, they were fires, candles, oil lamps. There'd been some experimentation with argon gas lamps, didn't go very well. Gaslight, which originally was made by burning coal, and then the Peales adopted a new process that was much cleaner and safer, burning pitch, really revolutionized indoor lighting. And so Rembrandt Peale, like really all of his family, was very interested in new technology and science. He was as much an innovator and a technologist as he was a painter and entrepreneur. And so he introduced gaslight chandeliers to light his galleries at night so that he could keep the doors open at night and sell more tickets. And we know from documentation the writings of Rubens Peale, his brother who took over running the museum in the 1820s, that those nighttime open hours were really key to the financial well-being of the museum. Well, people were so fascinated by the light that if they couldn't afford the ticket to come in and see the exhibitions inside, it said they would gather out on Holiday Street and kind of gawk at the light coming through the windows, because the quality, the intensity of the light was much stronger than anything that they were used to. This again is a modern painting showing such a scene on Holiday Street in front of the Peale by Richard Schlecht. And anyway, people were so fascinated and excited by this new technology that by 1817, Peale and his business partners had received the contract from the city to install a citywide network of gas streetlights. And the first one that was lit on the corner of Holiday and East Baltimore Street is still there today. It's been restored by BGE. And in fact, the company that Peale founded to provide this network of street lamps is still in existence, and it is now called Baltimore Gas and Electric, originally the Gas and Light Company of Baltimore. So you can go see that and know that that's where this nickname of Baltimore as Light City comes from, that it was the first city in America to have been lit by gas streetlight. And it may seem a small thing, but actually it really transformed the way people worked and played. They could go out after dark safely, really for the first time. So I actually compare it to the introduction of things like laptop computers and smartphones in terms of how it changed people's behaviors. Now, this is a photograph not from the 19th century, but from the 20th, just before the Peale underwent its first major renovation. But I just put it out here because it marks the next phase in the Peale building's history. Unfortunately, despite the gaslight and the mastodon, despite Rembrandt's brother Rubens coming in and introducing live acts and making of the Peale Museum not just a business but show business, even had live animals, lions and eagles and all sorts of things on display in the museum, live ones. The museum just never really got out from underneath the debt of being built in the first place. So to finally pay off those original investors, the Peale brothers decided to sell the building to the city, and it opened in 1830 as the first city hall for the city of Baltimore. When the new city hall, the one that we see today, was built in the 1870s, the building was repurposed to become male and female colored school number one. So we're now in the Reconstruction era. A white public school system had been around for about 50 years already, but finally, there were schools available to African Americans and people of color. And there were originally about 9 schools created. Of those, the one that was housed at the Peale, male and female colored school number one, was the first to offer a secondary school education. And this was a really important innovation because, and this is the charter for that high school, because until you had a high school education, you couldn't teach. So the colored schools were entirely taught by white teachers until, thanks to the activism of the Brotherhood of Liberty and leading African-American activists in Baltimore, there really were no Black teachers because they couldn't get, Blacks in the city couldn't get high school degrees. With this change in 1882, finally, Black students were able to become teachers. And in fact, the school very rapidly outgrew, the student body outgrew the building, and a new building, much better facilities and more salubrious circumstances, was opened on East Saratoga. It was called the Colored High School. That school went on to become the Frederick Douglass High School, one of the most historic schools in America. So that part of the Peale's history is a really critical one. And in fact, on our YouTube channel, you can take a little ghost tour, as we call it, of the building. We don't really have very many physical artifacts left from this period. There's this charter, which is in the Baltimore City Archives. And there's a diploma from one of the graduates of the first colored high school who had started her career at the Peale in the collection of the National Great Blacks and Wax Museum. But what we do have are the stories, and we know a lot about the conditions because the rooms were more or less the same footprint then as they are now. So you can take that video ghost tour, and here's some more of the stories of the male and female colored school on the Peale's YouTube channel. When the school moved on, the building started being used for manufacturing, and actually that almost did the building in. It was very damaged. And so by the 1920s, there was talk of just tearing the whole building down. But instead, a group of journalists and citizens came together and convinced the city to renovate it and reopen it as the first municipal museum of the city of Baltimore. And it ran as that from 1930 until 1997. This is an interior from early in the 20th century. And this lovely garden was added on the back. The architectural sculpture you see here at the end was by the Italian sculptors Andrea and Franzoni, who were the sculptors of the US Capitol, the very first one that the British burned in the War of 1812. And I am told, and again, I invite anyone here who knows better or knows differently to confirm or deny this, but because their work was destroyed with the US Capitol, this piece, which was made by them in 1806 for Union Bank in Baltimore, is the oldest still extant piece of architectural sculpture in the United States. And it was the transfer and its restoration were paid for by BGE, and it was given to the Peale and installed in the garden as part of this renovation in the 1930s. And so this garden, where formerly there had been gas manufacture for Rembrandt Peale's chandeliers and the street lamps of the city, now there's a lovely jewel-like garden, although unfortunately the Baltimore City Life system was more or less shut down by the city. Several museums were closed in 1997, including the Peale, and the building was abandoned for about 20 years. So when I joined the Peale in 2017, this is what the garden looked like, very overgrown. Fortunately, the Peale has always had lots of friends and people who love it, and a whole group of them came together and at various points in different phases of the renovation and renovated it, replanted it. We collaborated with the National Trust for Historic Preservation's Hope Crew project, Hands-on Preservation Experience project, and students out of Morgan State University School of Architecture who came and did an awful lot of work, brick repointing, repainted and restored the 19th century gas streetlights that are in the backyard. And we even had a visit from Helix, the bearded dragon, at one point. So it's now a really beautiful space, kind of a hidden oasis in downtown Baltimore. And thanks to another grant by BGE, we will be greening the alley next to it, which will help us extend the garden so that we actually have entrance both on East Saratoga and Holiday Street in a much larger space. So do hope you can come by and visit us sometime, even during COVID. It's a nice, safe outdoor space, and it is available for public events and meetings and things like that too, as long as they obviously follow the current health regulations. The interior actually it's still usable to an extent. The roof started leaking in this 20-year hiatus, and so it sustained a lot of water damage. But as you can see, we used it for all sorts of things, including we have our own replica magic ring of fire created by the folks at volunteers from BGE and Baltimore Foundry Works for us. We also had, thanks to Submersive Theater, who've had a laboratory at the Peale for a number of years, since 2017, created us a mastodon puppet, which actually dances. So perhaps some of you have been inside. It's just a wonderful space. And there's something so human about the proportions, because it was designed on the kind of plan of a federal style row house. But with this kind of picture gallery added on top, which is what makes it architecturally unique, and that's the large image that you see on the right, which has a cupola allowing natural light into the room. And I think it's just a very welcoming space. We did a program here actually with students from the Augusta Fells Savage Institute for the Visual Arts, and surveyed them afterwards about, they took over the building really and ran their own storytelling summit. And we asked, was it important that it be held at the Peale, or could it have been held anywhere? And one of the students said, oh, it was critical that it was at the Peale. And she said, when I walk into that building, I just feel this weight lifted from my shoulders. And we've seen that over and over, that there's some magic in this building that people fall in love with. And so we're sad that it can't be open to the public right now, because we need to have all this interior work that we need to do to make it safe and accessible, but can't wait to welcome everyone back. In the meanwhile, of course, we are online. This is just some of the damage that you can see, the water damage, the leaking, and all of this. We are currently fundraising to complete the interior renovations. And I'm delighted to say that we have less than $1 million to raise now on this project, this $4.7 million project. So we're very much hoping to wrap it up this year and be reopened fully by the spring of 2022. And again, if you can help us, this is very much a community effort, and we'd love to welcome you to the project as well. This is what we anticipate the garden looking like. This is a rendering by our architects, SM&P Architects. And you might notice that there's, those of you who know the garden will see that a staircase has now been added that goes from the garden up to the picture gallery. We also will have a little cafe so that you can bring coffee and something small to eat out into the garden. And that's something that we're hoping to partner with our neighbors Ida B's table on. They've been great partners and do most of our catering at the Peale. So anyway, again, hope you can come and join us and enjoy that space soon. If you want to learn more about the renovation of the building and the plans for the uses of the interior, do join us for our online gala on September 25th from 7 to 8:30. There you'll be able to buy a brick to support our campaign and help continue the restoration of the building and the garden, and also learn about how you can even name a gallery. So we're looking for that kind of support and sponsorship at all levels. Looking now quickly at the future of the Peale, I included this image. This is Samuel F.B. Morse's Gallery of the Louvre, painted in the 1830s. And so this is when the Peales were selling their building and transferring. Actually, for a period, they moved their collection to another rented premises on East Baltimore Street in Baltimore before selling the collection to P.T. Barnum, who moved it to open his first museum, the Museum of America in New York City. But what you see here is the Louvre being used very much as what I would call a production house. That is, people are sketching, they're painting, they're conversing, they're studying, they're learning. They are as much creating culture and art as they are studying from the art and the culture of the past. And this has really been an important model for us, this idea of going from being not just a treasure house, but also to a production house of culture, a platform where the stories of Baltimore can be told. This initiative started in 2016, actually, as Be Here Baltimore, which was a community-based storytelling project. And through it, the Peale now is home to the largest collection of Baltimore stories that have ever been digitally recorded and available. So we work with storytellers to record and to share their stories on all sorts of platforms. They very much remain the owners and the intellectual property in their stories. And we really serve as an amplifier, hoping both to get those voices and stories heard, but also to help storytellers find new paths to sustaining their storytelling practice. So we help with writing grants, with finding ways for them to continue to make money off of storytelling to continue to support their work. One of the programs that we are also home to is the Smithsonian Institution's Museum on Main Street program. It's part of this traveling exhibition service. And it takes exhibitions to small towns of fewer than 10,000 residents all across the US. And the Peale provides the digital storytelling and recording services that are part of each of those exhibitions. Partnerships like that are really critical. I mentioned earlier Erin Hinken, whom you see here on the left from WYPR's Out of the Blocks, our good friend Rick Cruz, who lives on Holiday Street, and they're doing a live storytelling session at our first Founders Day open house in 2017 here. We're always looking to partner with people and to realize their storytelling projects. So there's so many storytellers and storytelling groups and initiatives in Baltimore. Again, we don't see ourselves in any way in competition with them, but quite the contrary, we seek to enable them and connect those initiatives so that we have a whole greater than the sum of its parts. On the right here, you see Mama Linda Goss, our storyteller in residence. And we think that kind of personal touch is really critical. The work that we do is about getting up close and personal. Also evoking Brian Stevenson's from the Equal Justice Initiative's call to get proximate to the stories and the problems that you're trying to change. On the left, you see Devin Allen, whom you might know as now I think he's been on the cover of 2, if not 3 Time magazines. You know, homegrown, self-taught photographer who held his first solo exhibition at the Peale in 2018, curated by the artist Jeffrey Kent. And it was a really fascinating show that, in a sense, also updated the history of the Peale as a museum, in that it was called The Spaces of the Unentitled, and it was really about the homes, the row houses, the traditional architecture around Baltimore, and the stories that they tell, even when they're abandoned or breaking down, and the importance of preserving and hearing those stories as well. I see this as kind of a 21st century retake on the famous Baltimore row houses exhibition that was at the Peale in the 20th century, curated by the late Mary Ellen Hayward, whom we were very sorry to lose as a friend and from the board of the Peale due to her untimely death in July. And so there's this kind of sense of we want to be looking backwards as well as forwards to connect the stories across the history of the Peale. But it's also a social space. It's where people come together. This is a group of young students from MICA who took over the building and held an exhibition there. And we've done an awful lot of that, and very love to host young artists and performers and their work. This is the group from the Augusta Fellows Savage Institute of Visual Arts I mentioned, who held a storytelling summit at the Peale last year. But we're also very aware that, you know, with the building shut and we can no longer welcome people in person as easily, that bridging the digital divide is critical for an organization whose collection really is born digital now. The physical collection was transferred to the Maryland Historical Society when the Peale was shut down in 1997. So our only physical artifact technically is the building itself. Otherwise, our collection are these digitally recorded and live performed stories. Well, how do we make sure that in a time when a lot of people are struggling to get access to the internet, that those voices and those stories are still recorded and become part of the cultural record? One of the critical initiatives that we've been part of to bridge that digital divide is led by the Libraries Without Borders, a wonderful organization out of DC that is delivering technology kits, a laptop and a MiFi setup to to families and neighborhoods around the city that lack internet access. And so people can use that to record and to hear Baltimore stories and do much more as well. Our storytelling ambassador, Daisy Brown, initiated the Stoop Shoots project, where she walks around the city and at a safe social distance takes photos and records the stories of people sitting on their stoops. And if you don't have internet access to use our free app or our website to share stories, and you don't happen to run into Daisy, you can also just call our storytelling hotline, which is 1-833-TELL-STORY, TELSTRY, and record your story there. Daisy photographed a group of young people, young entrepreneurs who call themselves the G300 Squeegee Squad. Their usual area of operation up until kind of the pandemic has been at the corner of Orleans and Gay Street, washing windows. And Daisy photographed them during the making of a film that was produced by Baltimore National Heritage Area on which the Peale served as kind of advisors. And in fact, 2 films have been made about this group. The first was really very focused on the work and kind of giving a glimpse at the people behind the G300 and the squeegee entrepreneurial sector, if you will. And the second is about the Baltimore Banners hockey team. That was produced by Miles Banks, and that features one of the G300, and it's a wonderful project from the Tender Bridge that is really trying to support these young people in building businesses and making sustainable livelihoods for themselves. And key to that is making sure that people understand their stories. Inside the Peale, we've done an awful lot of immersive theater projects. This is the H.T. Darling Incredible Museum produced by Submersive Productions, which some of you may have come to, or maybe you've taken a time travel tour with David London, our Chief Experience Officer. He can take you back to Rembrandt Peale's private study 200 years ago. And all of that, as well as this exhibition, which was created by the strikeWare Collaborative and held at the Carroll Mansion actually early this year, enabled us to pivot quite quickly when we could no longer do things in person to creating digital programs and online exhibitions. So here you see a show about actually that history of the Peale as male and female colored school #1 in the show called Renovations by strikeWare Collaborative, which included VR and AR experiences as well as digital projections. And we've now moved a lot of that kind of work into a variety of online immersive contexts, one being Second Life, the virtual world where starting with the model that we saw at the beginning of this talk that's in the earlybaltimore.org website, the digital model of the Peale as it was in 1815, the team from Linden Lab and Virtual Ability Inc. were able to rebuild the Peale in this virtual world so that you can visit it inside and out. And it's just incredible the job that they did and how much it's like the Peale, but also different in interesting ways, allowing us to do things that we couldn't even do with a physical building. So I welcome you again to visit us in Second Life and join over 12,000 people who have visited us or seen one of our Second Life programs through YouTube and Facebook to date already. This is allowing us to reach a much larger audience than people who would ever even be able to come to Baltimore, let alone to the Peale while we're closed down. So we're excited about that, and we'll be talking about that a little bit more during the gala. And if you come to the gala, you can actually visit the Peale without necessarily having to go into Second Life. So we can give you a bigger tour of that. We also do lots of virtual tours and talks and lectures, capacity building workshops for storytellers as part of our new storyteller membership program. This is another interior shot of our Chief Experience Officer, David London, sitting inside the virtual Peale underneath the portrait of Rembrandt Peale by his father, Charles Wilson Peale. And those of you who've been in our building in Baltimore might recognize this, same and yet somehow different. So that's really kind of the main things that I wanted to go over. We've been getting wonderful feedback on the Peale, but we'd love to hear your voices as well. With that, I think I'd like to just hand over to you all and start answering questions. Yes, the Second Life URL. Yes, if you, actually the easiest thing for me to do right now, let's see, maybe I can stop screen sharing here, is I will get that link and paste it into the chat here, but also if you go to the Peale's website and just look up Second Life, search it on our site or whatnot, you can find another page with this link as well that will take you there. Let's see, and yeah, thank you, George, for a shout out about accessibility. One of the things that going online during the pandemic has actually brought us to do is really up our game in accessibility. Obviously, inclusion is a core value. Like, we can't create a truly inclusive and representative soundtrack of the city if we aren't including everybody. So that means, people with disabilities, people who, for whatever circumstances, need to get text transcripts or have sign language interpretation, has always been something that we've aimed to do. And actually online, we find it even easier to do than in person. So all of our online programs now include American Sign Language interpretation and CART transcription as standard. And those recordings and those texts are also all available on our website. And in our members, our new coming members area, recordings of our events. Let's see, another question from Mark. Where are the exhibits that used to, okay, yes. So the collection and the exhibits that were at the Peale when it was the Municipal Museum and part of the City Life Museums Network are now all at the Maryland Historical Society. And the archives have been transferred to the Baltimore City Archives, some of those as well. Yeah. Any other questions? So I hope that provided maybe some new insights for anybody who is already familiar with the basic stories. Again, on our website, you can find more detail on the history of the Peale as male and female colored school number 1. Also about gaslight, history about our garden. But there's so many stories there. It will, I could speak for hours on them just with the little bit that we know now, which is just scratching the surface. So we're very keen to connect with scholars and researchers who might want to collaborate on unearthing more of them. Question about what happened to the Peale collection owned by P.T. Barnum. So that's another great story. So Barnum, actually, it's funny, we think of him as the circus man, but he really only got into circuses late in life. His first business was, he was a journalist and he ran a newspaper, and then he got into museums and traveling exhibits. And there's so many facets of that story we could go into, but for the sake of brevity, when he purchased the Peale's collection, he transferred it to his New York museum. And he had over 500,000 collection objects on display. But Barnum was plagued by fire throughout his life. And like many of the buildings that he built and owned, his museum in New York burned to the ground and everything was lost, just everything, including some live animals. Really tragic story, yeah. Where are all the photographs? I believe so. So the Maryland Historical Society has a lot of its collection digitized and online. So if there's something in particular, you might start by searching there. And then if you don't find what you're looking for there, check the archives. And again, the Baltimore City Archives is another good resource. And Rob Schoberlein, he's actually the one who found that charter for the male and female colored school number 1 high school. And he's very knowledgeable and incredibly helpful.
Okay, well, thank you, Nancy. This was a fantastic presentation. And thinking about Be More Historic next week, one thing that I'm constantly hearing this year, especially from colleagues in preservation and museum fields, are how do you become more relevant and responsive to what's happening today? And I think that what you're doing at the Peale is such a great model for how you can do that. So thank you for sharing everything that you're doing there. And it's very exciting too that you're closing in on the final stretch of the big renovation. I can't wait to see the final.
Yeah, thank you. Well, again, come join us for the gala. Just your presence is helpful. We have memberships starting at $0, and if you just don't have spare money, especially right now, that's totally understandable. We could use help just even with ambassadors doing outreach for us to spread the word. Tickets start at $10 for students, $25 for individuals, and we have a number of different membership levels for those who are in a position to help out more. And hey, there might be a gallery at the Peale waiting for you to put your name on it too. So come join us, because we're in the final mile now, and the rest of this ride is going to be really exciting. And I just can't wait to get the building fully reopened. And I think it's going to be just in time. Hopefully we will be over this horrible pandemic at the same time too, and lots of things to celebrate.
Thank you. I'll see you then.
All right. Thanks so much, Nathan. Great to see you all.
Bye.
Bye-bye.